Hello and welcome to Warblog. This is a development video for refugees. Been practicing on this Rwandan Civil War game because there'll be some refugees in it. It's pretty intrusive coding in that it's the sort of thing that would make lots of other things not work. And for what it's worth, I was a bit dubious, but hopefully it will sort of work. Now, essentially, don't worry about anything. This has got sort of like a lot of movement. Let's go into play mode. There's probably lots of things that will go wrong, not necessarily in this demonstration, but between now and when it really is live. But it's getting late, and so I thought I'd just do it, and then tidy up the loose ends as and when. So basically we've got a unit up here. As I said, I've given him 40 movement points just to make it easy, so I don't keep reloading things. There's basically some refugees in here. So refugees are essentially hidden units. When I say hidden, I mean they're sort of, once I've gone through it, you'll understand. I mean, basically there's some refugees, and when these units pass through this hex, I mean, it's not a great example because that's in Uganda. If you know anything about the Rwandan war, basically some Rwandan troops that come across from Uganda, that's where they are. They're basically Ugandan troops that sort of rebel and invade Rwanda, about 1,500 of them, with rocket launchers and things. But anyway, so what we're doing, we're passing through this hex, and what will happen, it reloads because it has to actually add a unit. I can't do that with the sort of the code that I use, so it's a bit inconvenient, but it's not actually that bad. So what's happened is this refugee unit, and they won't look like that, they'll actually look like the parent unit. So if it was a random refugee and this was the random colours, it would be blue without that, and it will look like that, pretty much like that, instead of white with blue, so you can tell who's who. Now, if I had some of my own refugees in there, I wouldn't trigger that. Now, there's some more in here. There's some more in here. There aren't any there. There's some in there, and there's some in there. So it's just a case of going through them. Now, he's gone and stuck himself right in the path there. Now, this is going to be interesting because I said there's another one in there, and I haven't tested this yet, but this is the perfect one, example to test it. But just to sort of take a couple of steps back there. Essentially, the refugee was in that hex, and basically it uses the retreat rules to find out a local hex. Now, I'm hoping it can't come from the hex I came from. I think that's pretty much done, but hopefully it won't. So when I moved into there, he went to there. When I moved into there, he also went to there. Now there's another refugee in that hex, so when I go into now because he's in there, I'll have to attack it. Look at that, it works. So there's the original refugee, and then there's the current one. So now I'm going to attack them. And I eliminate them both. Now, when you fight refugees, you're not really fighting them. You've still got all your movement. You don't lose any movement, and therefore your turn is actually not interrupted. You've just got to go through that process of clearing them out of the way. In theory, they could sort of run away, but basically, if you move into a hex of enemy refugees, they're not going to just sort of retreat. I could do it so that they automatically retreat and run away, but I haven't got that far yet. So anyway, we're going to move through there. They've got they exert no zones of control, so there's nothing in there, but there's one in there. So again, we'll come up with exactly the same thing. It didn't work for a second, and this time he's gone in front of me, but that's not a problem because I'm going this way. There's that other refugee. Oh no. I thought I had another one. One, two, three, four. 2, 3, 4. Maybe he's over there in 8i. Yes, he was in there. I thought I'd relocated him to here so I remember it, but I had one there, and they were visible and invisible. So basically that's refugees, and that's how they work. And so when the other player takes their turn, I haven't even tried this. Yeah. Now I've given them 2 movement to make them incredibly awkward to move. So, yep, so that's that. So, now essentially I'm a bit reluctant to put refugees in there because they're a bit like routing units. They just seem pointless in the sense that I was looking at someone playing routing units, and you spend quite a bit of your time moving them, rallying them, and effectively they're not doing anything. I mean, I just incorporate routing with the game mechanics. You know, any units considered a route is eliminated. I mean, you know, defender eliminated is a route. It doesn't necessarily mean they're all dead. But on here, you know, if you get too many of these refugees, you could be spending a lot of your turn. I hate it when that happens. A lot of things are still sort of a bit buggy. Okay, so it was their turn. That's why I wasn't moving. So I'd done that. So that's it. So basically, the thing is, I don't want the other person. I don't want the game to be sort of saturated with these refugees. But I think it's sort of an important consideration in modern warfare to sort of have them in there. So, and unless I use them, then they're not necessarily going to get in the way. It's not as though they keep popping up automatically every time you capture a city. I have to put them in there in a particular location. There's not really much more to say. It's been 8 minutes, so I don't want to sort of spend too long talking about it. It just seems to me that it's a fairly significant addition. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, and it's, you know, hopefully that will suffice to give that sort of angle on how this thing works. Now I've got a book sat here actually. It's not very good, but it's okay. I mean, I have only really started reading it. It's called Me Against My Brother, and it's all about the Somalia, Sudan, and Rwandan wars, and it talks about you know, the genocide and everyone fleeing, and you know, I think when you're looking at these sorts of battles in the sort of sense that I'm trying to sort of present them, I think it's going to be useful to sort of include that as part of the narrative, or the graphical narrative, so to speak. For example, it actually has a map of, I'm actually looking at it now, it's got a map of Rwanda, and pretty much the only thing on it are the refugee camps. So there are refugee camps in Goma, or around Goma, so these 3 hexes, maybe not, maybe 1 or maybe all 3, it doesn't really matter, you know, so basically I could have a refugee sort of logo, but there are other refugee camps down here. Well, this is Naya Rushishi, and on the other side of the border in Bukavu, and down here in somewhere around here in Kibiho. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that it? Yep. Oh no, there's one down here in Bamako. So basically, you'll be having to move your units or your moving your refugees to the refugee camps, and both sides will have their own refugees. And the thing is, I even dread to sort of mention it, is a little emotive, but both sides will have their own refugees, and you know, if you want to basically carry out your own genocide, then you can, you know, sort of say it as basically as it is. But you know, for example, they do sort of get in the way. I mean, I can't move down this road without going through these refugees. I might change that rule so that you automatically win the combat and they're not eliminated. They just automatically retreat. In fact, I probably think I will, because I think it's more realistic. Although, to be quite honest, I do want to include the option for actually attacking them, because that's sort of to some extent what they did. And so you'd be actually playing your forces to protect your refugees, and this would be where other things would come into play. For example, like the United Nations forces. I mean, I've got another book called Peace Operations by Paul F. Diel. You can actually pretty much read the whole thing online, but it's got some interesting stuff on it, in particular about the actual, whatever you call them, the missions that they've done, etc., etc. And a lot of these missions were really there to protect refugees, so I think that will come in useful for sort of integrating UN operations and modelling those. So you're actually sort of more inclined with accepting that one force is maybe going to do something, and then the other is, you know, the UN is there to actually protect the refugees, you know, etc., etc. So maybe going out and then stacking up with a refugee unit and then moving along at its pace to a refugee camp over the border or something like that. I don't know. So that's that. I mean, this is the Rwandan civil war, but it's only going to be like the first 30 days. It was a 3-year war. I'm reading through it, and the first 30 days was a sort of a block in its own right. I mean, basically they came across the Ugandan border and they took a bunch of places. Then their leader was shot, and I've got actually the leaders working now. They were always working. It's just they're not leaders. I keep flagging up as leaders. They're command units. That's what they do. But basically, after their leader gets sort of killed, they lose a lot of morale, and then the Rwandan government sort of get I think the Belgian government to send some troops over and some Zaire units, and there's some other intricate parts of what happened because they go away. I'll go on to that in a bit, but basically they fight back and they push all the rebels back over the border. So it's quite a concise first 30 days. That's what this is going to be. But just touching on that, what I just mentioned there, I mean, for example, in this war, what happened, well, basically, a minute and a half for this, the Rwandan government wanted the Belgians, I think, to come and support them, so they faked an attack against Butare, I think it was. It's either Kigali or Butare. They faked the attack, and the Belgians fell for it and sent 600 troops over, and they basically took up position around Butare or around their Belgian interests. It wasn't quite what they wanted, but you know, it was better than nothing. But then they went, because when it became a civil war, the Belgians had a law: their troops can't partake in civil wars, so they had to retreat. They wanted to go back, and it's the same sort of mechanism as these refugees. At a certain point, the units just vanish from the map. So, like after turn 5, they all vanish. Now, I'm a bit reluctant to sort of do it like that, because I don't like these things where suddenly you got something and it's gone. That's why I don't really like the out supply rules, because you can't necessarily see it or factor it in too readily. But similarly with the Zaire units, instead of going to the city, they went straight to the front line where they started fighting the rebels, but they also started raping and murdering the Rwandan population as well, and then they got sent home. So they didn't last more than 2 weeks either. And so you got units coming on and then going. But anyway, so that's that. So now we've got refugees in there. I'll speak to you later. Cheers, mate.